welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a text that's, well, pretty iconic, but also often misunderstood. The Kama Sutra.
That's right.
Now, when most people hear Kama Sutra, certain, let's say, images might pop into their head, maybe some rather acrobatic positions.
Definitely the most famous part.
And sure, those are in there, but we're going to explore the much broader scope of this ancient Indian text. We want to see what surprising insights it holds.
Exactly. It's easy to just, reduce it to that, but the sources we've looked at show it's so much more.
Right.
We're working from a translation that was meticulously put together that compared multiple manuscripts.
Oh.
Yeah, so it offers this real window into a world that saw relationships, society, pleasure, all as connected parts of a good life.
Okay.
You'll find sections on how a man might acquire a wife, how that wife should behave, even navigating relationships with other people's wives.
Oh, interesting.
And the role of courtesans, too. It's quite comprehensive.
Okay, so our mission today, our goal for this deep dive, is really to understand the key parts of the Kama Sutra from this translation and get a feel for its historical context. It's about going beyond just the surface level, beyond the usual assumptions.
Precisely. So let's start where it makes sense, the origins.
Okay. Origins.
Our source talks about the translator's work, how they compared different copies from various libraries to piece together a revised and complete version.
Sounds like a huge task, like historical detective work.
It really does. And then there's the authorship. Vatsyayana is the name usually credited, right, for these aphorisms on love.
Yes, Vatsyayana, that's the main author we hear about.
Right. But what's fascinating is that Vatsyayana himself points to earlier works.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he mentioned someone named Nandi who apparently wrote 1,000 chapters, which sounds enormous.
1,000?
Then Shvetatu supposedly abridged that to 500, and then Barbravia condensed it again to 150 chapters.
So Vatsyayana's work is almost like the Reader's Digest version of these even older lost texts.
Kind of, yeah. Our source says he composed his work as a concise guide, an abstract of what these earlier guys wrote.
Oh.
And his intention, he states, was to base it on Holy Scripture for the benefit of the world while he was living as a religious student.
So not just about pleasure, then?
Not at all. He aimed for a balance between dharma.
Which is like virtue or duty.
Exactly. Virtue, religious merit.
Yep.
Then artha.
Wealth, worldly success.
Right. And kama, pleasure, sensual gratification. He wanted a balanced approach to all three.
That trio, dharma, artha, kama, how did they see them fitting together? What does that tell us about their values?
Well, the text lays out a kind of hierarchy. If you have all three conflicting, dharma is better than artha, and artha is better than kama. That's the general rule.
Okay, virtue first.
But, and this is interesting, there are exceptions. Like a king should prioritize artha, wealth and stability, for his people.
Makes sense. Governance.
And public women, courtesans, might prioritize kama because that's their profession. It shows a kind of societal niche for them.
Now, here's something really interesting. The text apparently discusses whether women should even study the Kama Sutra. What was the thinking there?
Yeah, that's a great point. Some learned men at the time objected. They argued, well, women generally aren't allowed to study science, so they shouldn't study this either.
Okay, that sounds predictable for the time, maybe?
Perhaps, but Vatsyayana strongly disagreed. His argument was fascinating. He said women already know the practice of Kama Sutra. It comes naturally, derived from the science of Kama.
So they're doing it anyway, basically.
Pretty much. He used analogies like people performing sacrifices use the right words without knowing grammar, or people follow auspicious days from astrology without understanding the science.
I see the logic.
And he also pointed out that some women, princesses, ministers' daughters, courtesans, were actually versed in the Kama Sutra.
So for him, it was about understanding the why behind the what they were already doing.
Exactly, understanding the principles. And it wasn't just about sex either. The text mentions other arts a woman should study alongside it.
Right. What were those?
Singing, playing musical instruments, and dancing.
Okay, so a well-rounded skill set suggests a broader view of what made a woman, well, accomplished or desirable.
Absolutely. It paints a picture of education encompassing both the arts of love and more traditional artistic pursuits.
Let's shift gears then. Part 3 deals with the acquisition of a wife. This isn't quite modern dating advice, is it?
No, not exactly. It outlines strategies for a man to, win over a girl for marriage.
Strategies. Okay.
The emphasis seems to be on gradual intimacy, building confidence slowly.
How so?
It suggests starting small, embracing, offering tambula.
Cambula. What's that?
It's a preparation of betel nut and betel leaves, kind of a customary offering.
Like a little icebreaker gift?
Sort of, and
Yeah.
initiating simple conversation, things she can answer easily. It's all very step-by-step.
Patience seems key.
Definitely. The text even says if she refuses the tambula, the man should be conciliatory, maybe even kneel, because women apparently rarely disregard that. Soft kisses are also mentioned at this stage.
In conversation.
Crucial. But simple topics first. Interestingly, it notes girls might hear everything, but not always respond verbally.
Insight into communication styles, maybe. What about more active ways to connect?
Oh yeah, spending time together playing games, age-appropriate stuff.
Like what?
Things like picking flowers, making garlands, playing make-believe family, even cooking together.
Sounds quite innocent.
It does.
Yeah.
Also dice games, cards, odd and even, finding the middle finger, a game with 6 pebbles, group games too, like hide and seek, playing with seeds, blind man's buff.
Wow, specific examples.
Yeah, these pastimes were ways to build familiarity and trust, probably in a context where interactions were more restricted than today.
Makes sense. So build trust through shared activities. What else?
Gaining the trust of her female relatives and attendants was vital. Especially the nurse's daughter winning her over could apparently smooth the path.
Ah, the power of the inner circle.
Exactly. And gifts, of course. Toys, dolls, musical instruments, things a young woman might like. It's a different world from, swiping right.
Definitely a different world. What about physical affection during this courtship phase?
There's a progression outlined. Starts subtle, like intentionally holding hands during games.
Okay.
Then moves to various types of embraces, the kinds described earlier in the text about sexual union, but used here non-sexually at first.
Right. Building blocks.
Subtle romantic gestures are encouraged. There's even this tactic called the divisive illness.
Divisive illness.
Yeah, the man pretends to be sick to get her to visit and care for him, creates an opportunity for interaction.
A bit manipulative, perhaps.
Maybe by our standards. But throughout all this, conversation is stressed as key to winning her over. The power of talk, even then.
So once the connection is made, how does it become official? Marriage.
It touches on different forms of marriage. One is the Gandharva form, which is based on mutual consent.
Mutual consent, okay.
In that case, once the girl is won over and they're acting like husband and wife, they perform a fire ceremony according to religious law. Then they gradually let the families know.
Gradually. Interesting.
The text also mentions ways to get a wife if she's indecisive or unwilling, but our source doesn't really detail those methods.
Okay. Let's move to part 4 then. About a wife. What was the expected conduct? This should offer some contrast.
Oh, definitely. The expectations are pretty specific. A wife should avoid certain company, female beggars, Buddhist nuns, women seen as unchaste or troublesome.
So, controlling her social circle.
Seems like it. And regarding food, she should always think about her husband's likes, dislikes, and what's healthy for him.
Okay. Attentive.
Very. When he comes home, she should be ready to do what he asks, even wash his feet, or have a servant do it. It paints a picture of a very defined household role.
Defined is right. What about her life outside the home? Social stuff.
Her social life was also pretty much subject to his approval. Yeah. No accepting or giving invitations, going to weddings or sacrifices, hanging out with female friends, or visiting temples without his okay.
Wow. Very restrictive.
Even playing games should align with his wishes. There is a hierarchy in daily interactions, too. She sits after him, gets up before him, doesn't wake him up. The kitchen should be clean and private. It really shows the power dynamics.
Clearly. How should she handle it if the husband misbehaved?
The advice is quite measured. She shouldn't blame him too much, even if she's upset.
No yelling.
Definitely no abusive language. Instead, she should offer gentle, conciliatory rebukes, maybe when they're alone or with friends. Being a scold is seen as a big turnoff for the husband.
So keep the peace.
Pretty much. And avoid bad expressions, sulking, eavesdropping, loitering, or neglecting her appearance. Keep clean and sweet. It's all about harmony, from her side at least.
Okay, let's jump back to part 2, love and attraction. How did they describe the stages of love back then?
Ancient authors had this whole progression. It starts with love of the eye.
Love at first sight.
Kind of. Then attachment of the mind, constant reflection, loss of sleep, getting thin, losing interest in enjoyment, losing shame, leading to madness, fainting, and even death.
Wow, that's intense. A bit dramatic?
Extremely dramatic, yeah. Perhaps poetic, but definitely extreme.
What about the initial spark? How did people fall in love?
Well, one view from Gaunikaputra was simple. Women fall for handsome men, men for beautiful women. looks first.
Okay, straightforward.
But Vatsyayana had a different take. He argued that you judge character by conduct, expressions, movements, not just looks.
Oh, more substance over style.
Exactly. He thought physical forms were unreliable indicators, which sounds surprisingly modern, doesn't it? Focusing on behavior.
It really does.
Yeah.
What about differences between how men and women loved, according to the text?
It highlights some interesting contrasts. It suggests women love without worrying too much about right or wrong, and don't usually pursue men just for a specific goal.
Okay.
And that women might initially resist advances, even if they're willing later. Persistence could win them over.
The playing hard to get trope, maybe.
Could be interpreted that way. Men, on the other hand, might overcome their feelings using morality or wisdom, and might just give up if initially rejected.
Different approaches.
Yeah. And it observes men can sometimes become indifferent after winning a woman over. It dismisses the idea that men only want what's hard to get as just talk. Gives a glimpse into perceived gender psychology then.
Right. Now, part 5 about the wives of other people sounds like risky territory. What's the angle here?
Well, it discusses how men might get involved with married women. It identifies certain guys in villages, the head man, the king's officer, the corn gleaner.
Why them specifically?
Because their positions gave them easier access and influence with the local women. Power dynamics again.
Ah, okay. Abusive position, potentially.
Or just opportunities arising from shared work in daily life. The text seems to be observing these social structures.
What about in cities? Like the king's harem. That sounds even riskier.
Definitely. It describes how city women might visit the harem during festivals and how royal attendants could facilitate meetings between the king's wives and other men.
Wow. Secret liaisons.
Yes, and women in the harem apparently used attendants to sneak men in, disguised as women.
In disguise.
But it warns against lying about it because that could be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, it also advises men to be cautious about entering the harem despite the access because of the inherent risks.
High stakes. Okay, part 6 is all about courtesans. How were they seen in that society? This might challenge some modern ideas.
It's a really fascinating perspective. The text notes that Hindus recognize courtesans as part of society.
Accepted them.
To a degree, yes. As long as they behaved decently, they were often regarded with a certain respect, unlike how they were sometimes treated with, brutality in the West.
That is different.
Their education was often better than other women's at the time. The text even compares them to the hetera in ancient Greece, educated, entertaining companions.
So a unique social role, perhaps more respected than we might assume.
It seems that way. They held a specific, recognized position.
What kind of advice did the Kama Sutra give them? Must be different from the advice for wives.
Oh, very different. Very strategic.
How so?
A courtesan should stand at her door, well-dressed, adorned, visible to passersby, basically advertising her availability.
Okay, marketing 101.
Kind of. And she should build friendships with influential people, guards, court officers, astrologers, powerful men, learned men, art teachers, confidants, jesters, even flower sellers and perfumers.
Why such a diverse group?
For protection, wealth, getting business, managing things, it's like building a professional network.
It really does sound like that. What about managing lovers? That must have been complicated.
Definitely a delicate dance. The text details tactics to get money from them.
Oh, like what?
Some are quite elaborate. Falsely claiming expenses for clothes or perfumes, praising his intelligence to loosen his purse strings, pretending she needs money for gifts or obligations, even making up stories about stolen jewels or property damaged by accident.
Wow, quite the schemes.
It also talks about how to choose between lovers, evaluating potential gain, wealth, religious merit, pleasure, their personal qualities, listening to friends' advice.
Very pragmatic.
Extremely. It even says when it's okay to take back a former lover. It's all business in a way.
A business approach to relationships in that context. Did mention pitfalls, things that could ruin a courtesan.
Yes, absolutely. It lists qualities leading to losses.
Such as?
Things like weak intellect, falling too much in love, pride, conceit, being too trusting or simple, anger, carelessness, even bad luck.
And the consequences.
Financial problems, damage to reputation, health issues, losing attractiveness. It also categorizes gains and losses in terms of money, religious merit, and pleasure. It's a whole framework for their profession.
Okay, part 7 moves to means of attracting others.
Yeah.
What kind of advice is here? Anything surprising?
It splits attraction into natural means looks, good qualities, youth, generosity, and artificial means, or art.
Art. Like makeup.
Sort of, but more involved.
Yeah.
If natural means are lacking, it gives recipes for enhancing attractiveness.
Recipes.
Yeah, ointments from specific plants, lampblack for eyelashes, oils for the body, even eating a powder made from certain lotuses with ghee and honey to become more attractive.
Wow. Like ancient cosmetics and supplements.
Pretty much. It also mentions using enchanted objects, a peacock bone, a specific seed, and there's an interesting bit about female attendants at puberty.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It describes a custom where a master would seclude a female attendant once she hit puberty.
Why?
The idea was that keeping her secluded, making her hard to approach, would increase men's desire for her.
Ah, creating scarcity value.
Exactly. Then the master could marry her off to someone who'd provide wealth and happiness. It's a glimpse into social customs and perceived psychology of attraction.
Definitely a different perspective. Now let's touch on some more unusual topics. Part 2, Chapter 9, discusses Uparishtaka, or mouth congress. What does the source say about this?
Okay, so the Kama Sutra describes two types of eunuchs.
Eunuchs specifically.
Yes. Those disguised as females who imitated female behavior and engaged in oral acts. This is called Uparishtaka.
And this was accepted.
It's presented as a source of pleasure and a way for them to make a living, a form of sex work, essentially.
Okay. And the second type?
Eunuchs disguised as males, often working as shampooers or masseurs. They would apparently secretly initiate mouth congress with male clients under the guise of massage.
Wow. That's quite specific and unexpected in a text like this.
It really is. It highlights a broader spectrum of sexual practices than may be commonly assumed for ancient India.
Definitely broadens the view. The text also mentions apadravyas, artificial aids. What were these about?
Right. Apadravyas were devices used to, well, supplement the size or thickness of the lingam.
Why?
Particularly for women categorized as the hastini or elephant type, who were thought to have larger yonis. The aids were meant to enhance pleasure.
Okay. What were they made of?
Various materials: gold, silver, copper, iron, ivory, horn, wood, tin, lead. They were supposed to be soft, cool, and stimulating.
And what forms did they take?
The text lists different types: a valaya, like an armlet, a sangati or couple, a chudaka or bracelet, even just a single wire wrapping. Also a kantuka or dalaka, which was a tube fitted to the side.
A tube?
Yeah. And if those weren't available, alternatives like tubes from wood apple or bottle gourd stalks were suggested.
The level of detail is amazing. It suggests a real focus on maximizing pleasure for different body types.
It does seem that way, a nuanced understanding, perhaps.
And then there's the perforation of the lingam. That sounds intense.
It does. The text describes this as a practice mainly in southern India, done to enhance sexual pleasure.
Ah.
It involved piercing the lingam, like piercing an earlobe.
Ouch.
Yeah. They used a sharp tool, then cleaned the hole, and had vigorous intercourse to keep it open. Then they'd gradually increase the size using small pieces of cane or other materials inserted into the hole.
That's quite a commitment to enhanced pleasure. Very striking.
Definitely a striking practice to learn about.
Okay, finally, we can't really ignore the appendix on sexual positions, even though we know the book is much more than that. Any particularly intriguing ones mentioned?
Oh, there's quite a variety listed. Some names are very evocative.
Like what?
Well, you have things translated as 69, obviously mutual oral stimulation, penetrating the eye, which sounds like a dominant rear entry position, climbing the tree, where the woman wraps her legs around a standing man.
Okay, descriptive names.
Definitely. There's the pivot, where she turns around him. The blow of the bull sounds forceful. Others like seesawing, buttering, the concealed door, the caress of the bud, the gazelle and the stallion.
Ah, buttering.
Yeah. The closed and the open ring, the ripe mango plum, the door ajar, the top, massage and sucking on the mast.
Mast.
Pincers from the front, riding the horse, driving the nail home, blows of the planting pin. The list goes on.
Some of those names are wild.
Mm.
Did the descriptions offer more than just the mechanics? Any sense of the experience?
Yes, for some, it mentions connections to sexual energy, the spine, different kinds of orgasms.
Oh, interesting.
Like climbing the tree is said to be good for raising energy along the spine, potentially leading to different orgasms. The pivot and some pincer variations are even recommended for beginners in sexual continence.
So some therapeutic or energetic aspects considered too.
Seems so, yeah.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, the source included some concluding thoughts from the translator. What was their overall take on the Kama Sutra?
The translator saw it as incredibly valuable for understanding early Hindu social life and just, well, human nature.
Timeless observations.
Yeah, they highlighted the simplicity and truthfulness of many points that still ring true today. They saw it less as a story and more as a collection of facts, plain language, suggesting it could be a source for countless narratives about enduring human desires and interactions.
Okay, so to sum up our journey today,
Yeah.
the Kama Sutra is clearly way more than just a sex manual. Absolutely. It gives us this detailed look into ancient Indian views on relationships, getting married, how wives should act, attraction, even the business side of courtesans. It's surprisingly broad.
It really is. It provides a fascinating window into historical attitudes about pleasure, society, human interaction, revealing a complex understanding that might surprise people today.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it? How these ancient ideas compare or maybe even resonate with how we see relationships and intimacy now.
For sure. And considering how detailed the Kama Sutra is about so many parts of life, it kind of begs a question, doesn't it?
Which is?
Well, what other historical texts might be out there, holding equally surprising insights into past cultures, into human behavior, just waiting for us to explore them?
That's a great final thought. A whole world of knowledge potentially hidden in plain sight, something for listeners to mull over.